Welcome, friends, and back to Ask Prof Wolff. Yeah, we've been away for a while, but we're back. We had a rough kind of reorganization, but we really are back. We appreciate your patience waiting for us, and we hope to show you by the quality of what we bring you now and into the future that it was worth the wait. I want to thank you. I want to let you know that we're going to have more of these and that we will be notifying you through social media, our website, Patreon community, exactly when and where these now live Ask Prof Wolffs will be happening. Let me stress they're live. You're going to have to bear with me as I make the mistakes that go with it, but it's something we thought you would be interested in, and so we're not only going to have me answer questions, that's what we did before, but this is a new and better Ask Prof Wolff, because after I do a couple of responses to questions you've already sent, we will have a couple from you right now live for me to respond to, and that's our plan going forward.
Yeah, you're live. So now you're going to read the question.
So let me begin with the first of the two questions that you have sent in. I want to thank Nicholas, who sent in the first question. And Nicholas's question follows up on earlier communications he sent to us, for which we are also grateful, in which he asks about the possibilities of socialism coming in the future from the ground up. You might call it local socialism. You might call it municipal socialism. It's the old idea, and it is very old. Goes back into the 19th century, if not before, of the idea that socialism not only can be built from the bottom up in society, from local towns and villages and communities on up to the country as a whole, but that may be as important or more important than socialism coming down from higher levels of government and regional social organization. So let me first begin by saying to Nicholas and to all of you, there is no blueprint on how socialism comes about. No one knows what the best way to do it might even be. Socialism has always been a matter of trial and error, figuring out what is the way to criticize and go beyond capitalism to something better for all of us. No one has the license to tell us how to do it. It may be better to do it one way than another at this point in time or at this part of the world, and at a different point in time and in a different part of the world, other ways are better. But one of the ways has always been from the bottom up, local socialism. And I want to talk to you about that. Before I do, there's a recent book that I want to mention to you if you're interested to go follow. It was published this year, 2023, by Verso, V-E-R-S-O. And the author is Sheldon Stromquist, usual spelling. And here's the title, Claiming the City, A Global History of Workers' Fight for Municipal Socialism. And the beauty of that book is that it gives lots of examples and surveys how this has been done at different times and different places. It's a good introduction to the topic. Let me begin then by telling you with great interest and enthusiasm that socialism has often been brought into being locally, municipally, village by village, town and city by town and city. There are examples all over the world, but I'm going to focus particularly on the United States because so many of you are following this from that particular country. Right now, there are two projects I would direct your attention to, which are trying to build socialism locally. And they're at different corners of the United States. One is called Cooperation Humboldt, up in Northern California. And another one is called Cooperation Jackson, which is in the capital of the state of Mississippi here in the United States. You have heard me speak on other programs that we've produced with people active in both of those efforts, Kalia Kuno in Mississippi and David Cobb in Humboldt. What are they trying to do? They're trying to build socialist organizations, particularly worker co-ops, where the whole method of organizing work in a village or a town or a city is being changed from the old top-down hierarchical capitalist way, an owner, a board of directors at the top, few people telling a large number of people, employees, what to do and how to do it and when to do it, and taking whatever profits everybody helps produce for themselves to decide what to do with it. They have a different idea. They criticize that old model, capitalism, and propose an alternative, socialism. Work organized so that all the employees and the supervisor and all of the others needed in an enterprise become part of a democratic community. One person, one vote, together to decide what each enterprise in this democratic way will produce, what technology it'll use, where and how and when it'll schedule the work, and how to dispose of the profits that all of these employees have helped to produce. A municipal socialism could be and has been built on the basis of new factories, new stores, new offices organized in this democratically socialist way. Or they have worked it differently. Instead of these being new stores, new factories, and new offices, they are transitioning businesses that are doing perfectly well from the old capitalist model to the now democratic socialist model, converging, if you like, together with new stores set up like that. So here's a kind of socialism that develops, you might say, from the enterprise up. Well, what about help from the local government? There we have even more examples of socialism starting and building locally. It turns out local governments have enormous power that could be, it isn't very often yet, but it could be used to sustain and develop socialism. Continuing from what I said about worker co-ops, imagine electing a body of people, a local mayor, a local town council, or whatever it might be called, that sees its function as helping develop socialistically, democratically organized worker co-ops. Here's some of the things they could do. Number one, they could pass a local ordinance saying that, 20% or 50% of contracts given by the city to local businesses have to go to cooperative businesses so that they're on the same level playing field as the top-down capitalist businesses. Both of them have the right to exist, but the city is not supposed to privilege one against the other, to discriminate against one in favor of the other. This will give worker co-ops a chance to compete for and get city contracts. Could be done, has been done around the world. It's a lesson we can learn. Here's another one. To encourage a worker co-op sector, if socialists were elected to local government, they could use local government funds to lend to local cooperative businesses, to give tax breaks to local cooperative businesses. To subsidize local cooperative businesses on the simple grounds that they want to create a socialistic future for their community, and supporting this kind of business is a way forward to do that. And they could run for office on the promise they will do that. They might particularly favor those parts of the community that have been underdeveloped. the poor people, the black and brown people, the women who want jobs but haven't been able to find one in the local economy. These formerly discriminated against groups could be given the kind of priority to be helped if they set up a collective, a worker co-op sector of the economy. And then the general public would be able to see these kinds of co-ops, see what socialism locally means. And let me give you a few others just to give you a taste, whet your appetite. If we had more time, I could go into the long list, but here's a few more. And these are taken from efforts in terms of socialism at the local level that were very popular in the years 1880 to 1920 here in the United States. Just so you understand, this is not a new idea, and this is not a foreign idea. This is as American as apple pie. Here we go. Towns can do things for their citizens that private enterprises don't do. Look, the 19th century was a struggle, the whole century it took, to really establish public education. Before that, it was thought that whether you get an education or not is whether you can find and afford a school. No, the community said, and socialists were very active here. We want there to be free, universal education. Everybody, rich, poor, white, black, everybody is entitled to a free education. And when they won that, it was very important, although it didn't happen, to explain to people that socialism and socialists were behind all of that kind of thing. And so communities have set up public daycare to enable families to afford care for their children so that father and mother could go out and work to enable the family to enjoy a standard of living that would otherwise have been impossible. To this day, many, many millions of American families depend on child care organized locally with government subsidizing or organizing these kinds of activities. Let me give you yet one more example. Local communities in the United States rely for most of their revenue on what are called property taxes. Taxes on land, buildings, your home, your business inventory if you're a small local business. But here's something terribly important to understand. The property tax in the United States exempts one kind of property, stocks and bonds. The 10% richest Americans own 85% of the stocks and bonds. Exempting that kind of property from the property tax discriminates for the super rich and against the vast majority. Could that be changed? Yes. Could local communities fight for it? Yes. Do they at this moment? No. But they could. And if they changed it, and if they made the super rich pay a tax on their stocks and bonds the way they are required now to pay their tax on their land, their car, and their home, the revenues available to local communities would make everything I just went through and much else affordable, benefiting the mass of people. And if that isn't socialism, I don't know what is. Let me respond to a second question. And again, I want to thank all of you in our Democracy at Work community for the questions you are sending into us. My second question comes from Andreas, and I want to thank Andreas. And he asks, is the changing world economy impacting us? Are there institutions in particular that are changing the way they function in ways that are going to affect us in the way we live? And it's a very important question. The answer is a very strong yes. The world economic system is changing. faster and more profoundly now than it has in my lifetime. And you can see from my white hair, I've been around a while. What's the basic change? Well, here it is. Ever since the Great Depression, or for sure the Second World War, 75 years plus, the dominant economic player in the world economy has been the United States. International institutions, whether they are the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank or a whole lot of other institutions I could list off, they've been dominated by the United States because it was the biggest and most productive economic unit in the world. It surely was. World War II had pushed all other contenders for number one off the stage. But that has now changed. In the last 25, 30 years, the United States was closely connected to what has now become a competitor. It's the first real competitor the United States has had in almost the last century. I'm referring, of course, to the People's Republic of China. The United States and its economic allies are still a very powerful force in the world. They're usually called by the name G7, the Group of Seven. The United States, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Canada. Those are the seven. But we now have right next to them another group, China and its allies, known as the BRICS, BRICS, that stand for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to which 6 new countries have recently been added. The total output of goods and services of the G7, the US and its allies, is now, for the first time in history, just happened the last 2 or 3 years, the US and its allies' total output is less than the total output of China and its allies. That is a momentous transformation. Every third world country in the global south now has 2 friends to choose between, 2 countries to play off against each other for the contract, for the loan, for the way to get out of the poverty that has caused that part of the world to suffer. Everything is changing. The world is adjusting to the new configuration, and that will be part of our lives immediately now. It is the backstory to the war in Ukraine. It is the backstory to the troubles around Taiwan, Hong Kong, and so on. It is changing everybody's behavior right down to you, me, and everybody else. So yeah, everything is changing. The geopolitics of the world, changing the institutions which react back on the geopolitics. You know, it was once said with great wisdom that the world appears not to change. For decades, nothing seems to change. And then, suddenly, in a few weeks, decades of change are concentrated and happen. Well, now it's time to try our new thing, our being live. I want to recognize those of you that are sending us questions literally as we speak, and I'm going to give you answers. Bear with us, this is new, this live experiment between you and me. So we'll stumble our way through, but we'll get better at it as we go. So here's a question from Jack. And Jack asks, capitalism versus socialism is not markets versus central planning. But do you think limiting what we allow to be commodified and a greater role of central planning is still core to the socialism of the future? Well, Jack, wonderful question. I love that you asked it. Let me try to give you as brief an answer as possible. The problem in the 19th and 20th century was not that socialism didn't grow. It did. It's not that socialism wasn't successful. It was. Socialism is now a reality around the world, taken seriously by everybody, even these days by the United States, which thought it didn't have to. But the socialism that was successful does not need to be the one we are going to see be successful now. Here's what I mean. The old socialism, and you're quite right in your question, was all about markets versus planning, private property versus public property. It's amazing how many Americans still think of socialism as if that's what it was. It was that, but it isn't anymore. What do I mean? Socialism, like everything else, changes. Socialism, like everything else, evolves and develops. And there's been a criticism that what was done in the name of socialism, planning versus markets, public property versus private property, made all kinds of changes. Many of them were very good and we want to hold on to them. Some of them were not good and we don't want to do them anymore. And that's learning from history. Everybody ought to do it. But out of that came a new notion of what socialism's focus now should be. And as you know from the work I do, I'm one of the people who's pushing that socialism now means transforming the base of society, the workplace. First and foremost, the office, the factory, and the store, but inside the home too, to bring a real democracy and a real equality of people into the production process. I think that's what's going to be the hallmark of socialism in this century. But Jack is right. There's still an important role for the public versus the private. There are things that may best be done by private enterprise. Let's keep that. And may best be handled by a market. Let's keep that too. But keep them in the context of a question that Americans now have to face. We have to ask and answer. Which is better? Don't assume it. Don't be dogmatic. It must be always this. It must be always... No, it doesn't must be. For example, we make education a free good available to everybody, at least up to the 12th grade. By some bizarre logic, we've decided after that, it isn't going to be free anymore. In Europe, for example, in Germany, it is free all the way through university and college. Crazy, in my judgment, why we don't do that here. Been a great success in Germany, heaven knows. But let's talk about it. Let's take Jack's question seriously. Is medical care best handled in a profit system where you go to the doctor, don't know how much it's going to cost, borrow that you can't afford, debts, or get in trouble with your debt collector? Or should it be a free good, as it is in most other industrial advanced countries? For example, everywhere in Europe. Let's ask the question Jack asked. Don't make it capitalism versus socialism. Make it common sense. What's the best way for most people to have something handled, privately or publicly? And let's keep that separate from how the work process ought to be organized, top-down hierarchically or democratically, every person, one vote. Okay, we have another question coming in, and thank you. Bearing with us, your patience, and now sending us the question. Super. This live approach is beginning to show that it was a good idea. All right, we have a question from Francis. Can a democratically governed company make decisions against the interests of workers or against the community? This is a great question. If it's a democratically governed enterprise, if the workers in it, one person, one vote, together decide to do something, then the presumption is they're deciding to do what they all want to do. We're not going to allow coercion. One group of workers is not going to be able to dominate or control another. Everything will be discussed and everything will be put up to a vote. But there is an important thing that this question points to. Is it possible that workers in an enterprise democratically decide to do something that the larger community in which that enterprise is located doesn't want? In other words, how do you handle the difference between the community of the workplace and the community of where people live, their residences? And that has been thought through by the socialists who advocate the democratization of enterprises. Here's how their logic goes. There has to be co-respectivity between the workplace and the local residential community. They both have to be governed democratically. We already have the outline of that in our cities and towns, where we regularly vote for who will be the mayor and who will be on the town council and so on. We make those people accountable. If we do something roughly the same in the workplace, that whoever is in charge of the workplace rotates with people who aren't, if all decisions of the workplace are made by people who are accountable to the will of the majority, then we have the basis to really enter a wonderful new world in which democratic decisions made by the community where we live and democratic decisions made by the community where we work will have to agree. It'll be a little bit like the House of Representatives and the Senate. To get a law passed, they both have to agree. And they have to work out their differences to come up with a common agreed law that both of the majorities will support. So we already know how to do it. Now we're going to do it to deal with Francis's concern that a majority of workers make a decision which maybe the larger community that live there don't agree with, don't want. And then they'll have to work that out and work out to something that a majority of both communities democratically support. We have time for one more. And this one comes from Rakshif. My apologies if I haven't pronounced it. Rakshif asks, would it be better if workers, farmers, wage laborers own and run the central banks and financial institutions? Well, let me respond by extending my response to Francis that we just finished with. My answer is yes, but I want to explain what I mean. I don't think banks deserve any different organization and place in society than any other factory, office, or store. In other words, here's what I think. Number one, the workers in the banks, the clerks, the loan officers, the secretary, whoever, should first of all be reorganized into a democratic community. One worker, one vote, and together decide the policies of the banks. However, like I just said to Francis, the community that the banks serve, and those are two kinds, those communities served by the bank. One kind are all the customers of the bank, the businesses, the individuals that deposit their money and take out loans and work their credit cards and so on. That's one community. Let's call them the clients or the customers of the bank. And the second community is the people who live in the environment of the bank, who are affected by where the bank building is located, how the bank behaves, how the bank treats its workers, etc. And here now comes the socialist solution. You have to organize the clients into a community that makes democratic decisions. You have to organize the residential community around the bank that interacts with it, and you have to democratically organize the workers. And then you have to work out a procedure in which each of them has a kind of veto power on the other. The bank cannot do whatever it wants, regardless of the impact on its customers or its larger community. And the same holds for all of them. And this is not a daunting difficulty because it's already true. Local communities have power over enterprises. The enterprises spend a lot of time, hire a lot of lawyers, and buy a lot of politicians to control that. But it's there, that power is there. And every now and then you can see a community rise up and use its power to neutralize the power of the bank or the other local business. So we're going to democratize all of that. Socialism is, in many ways, especially the socialism coming up in this century, it's about democracy. It's about bringing real democracy where it was excluded before. Big banks don't think they need to live democratically. They don't organize inside democratically, and they have no serious, honest respect for democracy anywhere else. Watch them when you see them speak. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I want to thank you, and for those of you who submitted questions today, I will do my best to go through them and respond at the beginning of the next Ask Prof Wolff. This is now Ask Prof Wolff Live Edition, and we will let you all know when it'll happen the same way we did today. So if you haven't already, go to our website, democracyatwork.info, and sign up there to find out. And we'll also be using our social media as we did this time. Thank you, and I look forward to this resumption of Ask Prof Wolff.